Captain Zexhar drummed his four-clawed fingers against the command console, watching the security feeds with growing unease. The creature in Containment Bay 7 had broken another 3 restraint systems overnight, and his crew was running out of options. The thing wasn't even trying to escape, it just seemed to break everything it touched by accident. "Sir, we've lost another maintenance droid," reported Lieutenant Krell, his reptilian features showing clear frustration. "That's 12 this cycle." The creature just looked at it, and somehow the droid's neural pathways fried themselves. Zexhar hissed through his teeth. 3 weeks ago, his cargo vessel had been contracted to transport what the client called a rare specimen to the research station on Kepler 442b. The pay was exceptional, which should have been his first warning. The second warning came when they saw the containment requirements. A specialized bay with quantum-locked restraints, psychic dampeners, and enough warning labels to paper a small moon. The creature itself defied easy description. It stood roughly 2 meters tall when it bothered to maintain a consistent form, but its appearance shifted constantly like liquid starlight. Sometimes it looked almost humanoid. Other times it resembled a living constellation. The only consistent features were what appeared to be eyes, ancient, intelligent, and deeply amused by everything around it. "What's the latest damage report?" Zexhar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Hull integrity down another 2%. The creature's mere presence seems to interfere with our quantum stabilizers. Engineering estimates we have maybe 4 days before the ship's systems start cascading failures." Krell's voice carried the weight of impending doom. Zexhar had commanded cargo runs for 30 years. He'd transported dangerous materials, unstable elements, even live void serpents. But nothing had prepared him for this. The creature wasn't malicious, it actually seemed friendly in its alien way. It just existed on a level that their technology couldn't handle. "Sir, incoming priority transmission from the human vessel," announced Communications Officer Tala. "Humans?" Zexhar's dorsal spines flattened in confusion. "What are humans doing out here?" The main screen flickered to life, showing a surprisingly young human male with dark hair and an easy smile. Behind him, Zexhar could see what appeared to be a small but well-maintained ship. "This is Marcus Chen of the independent vessel, Lucky Break," the human said cheerfully. "Couldn't help but notice you folks seem to be having some technical difficulties. Thought you might need a hand." Zexhar studied the human's face. Humans had a reputation in this sector not for advanced technology or overwhelming firepower, but for their peculiar ability to solve problems that shouldn't have solutions. They were also known for taking on jobs that more sensible species would refuse. "Human vessel, this is Captain Zexhar. Our situation is complicated. We're transporting a Class 12 anomalous entity, and our containment systems are failing." Marcus whistled low. "Class 12? That's pretty serious. What kind of entity are we talking about?" "Unknown origin, possibly extra-dimensional. It appears to exist partially outside normal space-time. Our equipment simply cannot contain it safely." The human's expression grew thoughtful. "Mind if I take a look? I've got some experience with unusual cargo." Every instinct, Zexhar had screamed that this was a bad idea. Humans were known for their reckless courage, but this creature had already proven beyond their technology. What could one human do that a crew of experienced spacers couldn't? But as another alarm chimed, indicating further system degradation, Zexhar realized he was out of options. "Very well, Human Chen. Permission to dock granted. But I warn you, this creature is beyond anything we've encountered." 20 minutes later, Marcus Chen stepped aboard Zexhar's ship with nothing but a small toolkit and an expression of calm curiosity. He was smaller than most humans Zexhar had met, with calloused hands that spoke of practical experience and eyes that seemed older than his apparent age. "So where's our problematic passenger?" Marcus asked. Zexhar led him through the ship's corridors, noting how the human seemed completely unbothered by the increasingly aggressive system warnings. Emergency lighting flickered overhead as they approached Containment Bay 7. "The viewing portal is radiation shielded," Zexhar explained, activating the observation screen. "But I should warn you, direct visual contact seems to cause psychological effects in some species." Marcus stepped up to the viewing portal and peered inside. The containment bay was a mess of twisted metal and sparking electronics. In the center, the creature floated serenely, its form shifting between states like a living aurora. Huh, Marcus said after a long moment. Well, there's your problem. Excuse me? You're trying to contain something that doesn't want to be contained. Look at it, it's not fighting your restraints, it's just too big for them. Zexhar stared at the human. Too big? It's approximately 2 meters in height. Not physically big, Marcus said patiently. Dimensionally big. This little guy exists in at least 6 dimensions simultaneously. Your restraints are only designed for 3-dimensional objects. It's like trying to hold water with a net. Little guy? Zexhar's voice rose an octave. That creature has destroyed millions of credits worth of equipment. Accidentally, Marcus pointed out. It's probably trying to be careful, but it's like asking an adult to play with toys made for infants. Everything just breaks. The human studied the containment bay for another moment, then nodded decisively. I think I can help, but I'll need to go in there. Absolutely not. Zexhar's crew immediately protested. The radiation levels alone would kill most species in minutes. Marcus shrugged. Good thing I'm human then. We're pretty resistant to most forms of exotic radiation. Something about our evolutionary background on a planet with a damaged ozone layer. Despite every protocol and safety regulation screaming in protest, Zexhar found himself authorizing the humans' entry into the containment bay. What did they have to lose at this point? Marcus entered the bay wearing nothing but a standard environment suit and his toolkit. The moment he stepped through the airlock, every sensor in the room went haywire. But instead of the catastrophic reaction they expected, something strange happened. The creature turned toward Marcus and went completely still. For the first time since it had been brought aboard, it stopped shifting and took on a stable form roughly humanoid, with features that seemed almost curious. Marcus walked calmly across the twisted metal floor and stopped a few meters from the creature. He pulled out what appeared to be a simple folding chair from his toolkit, set it up, and sat down. Hey there, he said conversationally. Looks like you've been having a rough time. The creature tilted its head in a gesture that was startlingly human-like. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the ship's hull itself, a sound like distant music. Small shape, human, warm, curious. You are not afraid? Should I be? Marcus asked. You seem friendly enough. Just a little. Big for the accommodations. The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. Big, small concepts limited. I try to be small, quiet, contained, but the metal thought's restraints do not understand my nature. Marcus nodded as if this made perfect sense. Yeah, I can see that. The thing is, my friends outside are getting pretty worried. Their ship is starting to break down because you're too much for their systems to handle. Not intention harm. I am grateful warm for the transport journey. I wish no damage sorrow to the metal ship helpers. I know, Marcus said gently. How about we figure out a better arrangement? Something that works for everyone? As Zexhar watched in amazement, the human began what could only be described as a negotiation with a being that existed beyond conventional physics. Marcus explained their situation calmly and clearly, while the creature responded with concepts that the ship's universal translator could barely parse. After nearly an hour of this impossible conversation, Marcus stood up and folded his chair. All right, I think we've got a solution, he called out to the observation deck. But it's going to sound a little unconventional. At this point, unconventional would be a relief, Zexhar replied. The thing is, your passenger here doesn't need to be contained. It needs to be guided. It's not dangerous. It's just big, like trying to navigate a star destroyer through an asteroid field. It needs someone to help it be smaller and more careful. And how exactly do we do that? Marcus grinned. Well, it turns out I'm qualified. See, I used to work with deep space construction crews. You know what the most dangerous job in construction is? Working with materials that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I've spent the last 5 years learning how to interact safely with trans-dimensional entities. The creature spoke again, its voice carrying what sounded almost like excitement. The small, warm human understands the large concepts. He can be guide, helper, friend for the journey travel. Zexhar felt his world shift slightly. You want to assign a human as a babysitter for a Class 12 anomalous entity? Not babysitter, Marcus corrected. More like a dimensional interface. I can help our friend here stay stable and contained without fighting against its nature. Think of me as a translator between three-dimensional space and whatever realm it comes from. The idea was insane. It violated every safety protocol Zexhar knew. But as he watched, the creature carefully gathered itself into a more compact form, and for the first time in weeks, the ship's systems began to stabilize. This is highly irregular, Zexhar muttered. The creature's voice came again, now carrying unmistakable warmth and what sounded like genuine affection. Much appreciated, Boss Father. The small warm human will help me be good, careful, contained for the journey travel. Zexhar blinked. Did it just call you Boss Father? Marcus chuckled. I think it's trying to say something like respected leader or honored guide. Its communication is based on emotional concepts rather than direct translation. And you understand this. How? Same way I understand any other language practice and patience. Plus, humans are pretty good at reading emotional context, even from non-human sources. As if to demonstrate, the creature carefully moved to one corner of the containment bay and began to fold itself into a more compact configuration. The ship's warnings immediately decreased in intensity. You see? Marcus said. It just needed someone who could communicate properly. No force, no restraints, just mutual understanding and respect. Zexhar watched in fascination as the human set up what appeared to be a small camp inside the containment bay. He arranged his few possessions neatly, activated a portable atmosphere recycler, and began what looked like routine maintenance on his equipment. You're planning to stay in there? Zexhar asked. For the duration of the journey, yes. Our friend here needs constant guidance to maintain stability in our dimensional framework. Think of me as a living anchor point. The creature settled into what appeared to be a resting position, its form now stable and contained within the bay's dimensions. The ship's systems hummed with renewed efficiency. Besides, Marcus added with a grin, the pay for this kind of specialized work is pretty good. And it's not every day you get to be friends with something that exists in 6 dimensions simultaneously. As Zexhar left the containment bay, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just the successful containment of an impossible entity, but the beginning of what might be the strangest friendship in the galaxy. Behind him, he could hear Marcus chatting casually with the creature. Their conversation a mix of human speech and harmonic resonances that seemed to make the ship itself hum in contentment. Perhaps humans were even stranger than he'd thought. 3 days into their journey, Captain Zexhar had to admit that assigning the human as a guardian had been the best decision of his career. The ship's systems were running smoother than they had in months, and the creature who Marcus had started calling Shimmer had proven to be surprisingly helpful. Captain, Tala called from her communications station. We're receiving a priority distress signal from the research station. Zexhar's good mood evaporated instantly. What kind of distress? They're under attack. Multiple hostile vessels. Unknown configuration. They're requesting immediate assistance from any ships in the area. The research station on Kepler 442b was their destination. Home to over 3,000 scientists and support staff. It was also one of the most heavily defended installations in this sector. Whatever was attacking, it had to be formidable. How far out are we? Zexhar asked. 6 hours at maximum burn, reported Navigator Yixtel. Set course immediately, and someone get me the human. Marcus arrived on the bridge 10 minutes later, looking refreshed despite having spent 3 days in what amounted to a radiation-soaked metal box. Shimmer floated beside him, having somehow managed to project a small portion of itself outside the containment bay without destabilizing the ship's systems. Problem, danger, conflict approaches, Shimmer announced, its voice carrying overtones of concern. The destination goal place cries out in pain, fear, desperation. You can sense the research station from here? Zexhar asked in amazement. Our friend has pretty impressive range, Marcus explained. Existing in 6 dimensions has its advantages. Shimmer, what exactly are you picking up? The creature's form rippled as it concentrated. Metal ships, many, filled with cold, hungry, consuming entities. They devour, consume, destroy, not for survival, but for joy, pleasure, satisfaction in destruction itself. Marcus frowned. That doesn't sound good. Captain, what's the tactical situation? Unknown, Zexhar admitted. We're a cargo vessel. We have basic defensive systems, but nothing that could stand against whatever's powerful enough to threaten a major research installation. The small, warm humans always find solutions, Shimmer said, its voice carrying what sounded like absolute confidence. Boss Father will know the way path answer. Marcus rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, we do have one significant advantage that attackers probably aren't expecting, which is them, Marcus gestured to Shimmer. A trans-dimensional entity with the ability to exist outside normal space-time constraints. The question is whether our friend would be willing to help. Shimmer's form brightened noticeably. The metal ship helpers show kindness, respect, friendship. Shimmer will defend, protect, guard them, and the knowledge seekers, scientists at the destination place. Hold on, Zexhar interjected. We don't even know what we're dealing with yet. It could be a minor pirate raid. As if summoned by his words, the ship's long-range sensors began screaming warnings. The main display showed the Kepler 442b system, where dozens of massive vessels surrounded the research station. The attackers' ships were like nothing in Zexhar's databases, organic-looking things that seemed to pulse with malevolent life. Bioships, breathed Lieutenant Krell. I've heard stories, but I thought they were myths. What are bioships? Marcus asked. Living vessels grown rather than built, Zexhar explained, his voice tight with worry. They're used by the Devourers, a species that believes all organized matter should return to primordial chaos. They don't just destroy civilizations, they unmake them on a molecular level. The display showed the research station's shields flickering under constant bombardment. Several sections had already gone dark. How long before the station falls? Marcus asked. At this rate, maybe 2 hours, Yixtel replied grimly. Marcus turned to Shimmer. Can you do anything about bioships? Living vessels confused. They exist in only 3 dimensions. Easy to unmake, dissolve, return if Shimmer is close near touching distance. The problem is getting close, Zexhar pointed out. Those bioships will destroy us long before we reach engagement range. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he smiled, the kind of smile that made Zexhar's crew nervously check their restraints. Actually, I think we can get a lot closer than they expect. Shimmer, remember how you accidentally broke our containment systems by existing in too many dimensions at once? Yes, sorry, regret. Shimmer tried to be small, compact, contained. Right. But what if, instead of trying to be contained, you expanded just a little? Not enough to damage our ship, but enough to phase us slightly out of normal space-time. Shimmer's form rippled with excitement. Dimensional shift movement. Shimmer can wrap, protect, hide the metal ship in the between spaces, but dangerous, risky, uncertain for 3-dimensional beings. How dangerous? Zexhar demanded. Marcus considered this. Well, worst-case scenario. We could end up temporarily existing in a parallel dimension. Best case, we become effectively invisible to conventional sensors and weapons. And the middle case, we all get really dizzy and maybe see some colors that don't technically exist. Zexhar looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him with expressions ranging from terror to manic excitement. Through the main screen, he could see the research station's shields failing section by section. Do it, he decided. The transformation was unlike anything Zexhar had ever experienced. Shimmer's presence expanded throughout the ship, not physically, but dimensionally. Reality seemed to bend and flex around them. The stars outside took on impossible colors, and Zexhar could swear he could see the mathematical equations that described their movement. Dimensional phase shift complete, Marcus reported, his voice sounding strangely echoing. We're now existing primarily in the 4th and 5th dimensions, with minimal presence in normal space. I can't feel my left antenna, Krell complained. That's normal, Marcus assured him. It's still there, just rotated 90 degrees, through a dimension you can't perceive. Don't try to touch it. The tactical display showed their ship had effectively vanished. They were now racing toward the battle at maximum speed, completely undetected by the bioships that continued their assault on the research station. Approaching the outer perimeter, Yixtel announced. Distance to nearest bioship. 50 kilometers and closing. Shimmer, Marcus said. Can you target individual vessels while maintaining our phase state? Easy, simple, natural. Shimmer extends touch influence presence to unmake dissolve the confused living ships. What followed was the most one-sided battle in recorded galactic history. The bioships, for all their terrible power, existed entirely in conventional space-time. They had no defense against an entity that could reach through dimensions to touch their most fundamental molecular structures. Shimmer would simply extend a portion of itself toward a bioship, make contact with its living hull, and gently encourage its matter to remember what it was like to be separate atoms. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Each ship simply dissolved into harmless constituent elements. 12 bioships eliminated, Tala reported with obvious glee. The remaining vessels are attempting to retreat. Let them go, Marcus advised. Shimmer's pretty tired from all that dimensional manipulation. We should probably return to normal space before our friend overexerts itself. The transition back to conventional reality was much smoother than their departure. One moment they were floating through impossible geometries, the next they were back in normal space, watching the last of the bioships flee the system. Unknown vessel, came a transmission from the research station. This is Commander Yalith. Please identify yourselves. Our sensors show you just appeared out of nowhere and somehow defeated an entire Devourer fleet. Zexhar activated the communication system. Research Station Kepler 442b. This is Captain Zexhar of the cargo vessel, Steady Prophet. We're here to deliver your, special cargo. Captain Zexhar, you're 3 days early, and... Did you just say you defeated the Devourers? Marcus leaned into the communication pickup. Actually, Commander, we had help from our passenger. I think you're going to be very interested in meeting them. The research station's docking bay was a flurry of activity as they approached. Medical teams, security personnel, and what appeared to be half the station's scientific staff had gathered to meet them. This is going to be interesting, Marcus commented, watching the crowds through the viewport. Shimmer, you ready to meet your new hosts? Excitement, curiosity, anticipation fills Shimmer with warm, bright joy. The entity replied. Will the knowledge-seekers scientists be kind, gentle, respectful like Boss Father? I think so, Marcus said. But remember, they're going to want to study you. That means lots of questions, tests, and probably some really boring equipment scans. Shimmer enjoys learning questions, knowledge sharing. Will Boss Father stay with Shimmer during the study's examinations research? Marcus looked at Zexhar, who was listening to this exchange with growing amusement. That depends, the captain said. The human's contract was for transportation and containment. Technically, our job is done. Actually, Marcus said slowly, I might be interested in extending that contract. Research stations always need security consultants, especially ones with experience in transdimensional entities. Shimmer's form brightened noticeably. Boss Father will stay, remain, continue? Shimmer is grateful, happy, pleased. As their ship docked with the research station, Zexhar reflected on the strangest cargo run of his career. He'd started with an impossible passenger and a failing ship. He was ending with a hero's welcome and the knowledge that humans were even more remarkable than he'd imagined. Captain, Marcus said as they prepared to disembark, thank you for trusting me with this. Not many captains would have taken the risk. Thank you for saving my ship, Zexhar replied. And possibly the entire research station. Just doing my job, Marcus said with a grin. Besides, Shimmer did most of the heavy lifting. I just provided translation services. As the airlock opened and they prepared to transfer their unique passenger to its new home, Zexhar couldn't help but smile. In a galaxy full of strange and wonderful things, humans and their impossible solutions never ceased to amaze him. Behind them, Shimmer hummed contentedly, already looking forward to new friends and new knowledge. And beside the trans-dimensional entity, Marcus Chen prepared to begin the next chapter of what was turning out to be a very unusual career. 6 months later, Research Station Kepler 442b had become the most sought-after posting in the scientific community. The reason was simple. They had achieved the impossible. Not only had they successfully studied a transdimensional entity, but they had done so through genuine collaboration rather than containment. Dr. Sarah Voss, the station's new director of transdimensional studies, stood in what was once Containment Lab 7 and was now simply called Shimmer's Workshop. The sterile white walls had been replaced with curved surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight. Equipment that shouldn't have been able to function in normal space hummed quietly, powered by principles that existed somewhere between science and magic. "Marcus," she called to the human who was currently floating 3 feet off the ground, apparently having a heated discussion with empty air. "The Galactic Science Consortium representatives are here for their quarterly inspection." Marcus Chen descended gracefully to the floor, his feet touching down with practiced ease. 6 months of working closely with a transdimensional entity had given him abilities that no human was supposed to possess. He could see in spectrums that didn't exist, understand mathematics that hurt other people's brains, and most remarkably, exist partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously without losing his sanity. "Tell them we'll be right there," Marcus replied. Shimmer's just finishing up the latest gravitational resonance calculations. The empty air beside him shimmered literally and resolved into the familiar form of his extra-dimensional partner. Over the months, Shimmer had learned to maintain a more stable appearance, settling on a form that resembled a tall, elegant humanoid made of living starlight. The effect was both beautiful and slightly unsettling. "The mathematics patterns equations are complete," Shimmer announced, its voice now perfectly clear thanks to months of practice with human communication. "The new star formation process should increase efficiency by 37%. Dr. Voss shook her head in amazement. Even after half a year, she couldn't quite believe what they had accomplished. Shimmer wasn't just a subject of study, it was a colleague, a teacher, and quite possibly the most advanced researcher on the station. The entity's unique perspective had led to breakthroughs in physics, engineering, and even biology that would have taken human science centuries to discover. The 3 of them made their way to Conference Room Alpha, where a delegation from the Galactic Science Consortium waited. The consortium was the governing body for all major research institutions, and their quarterly inspections could make or break a station's funding. The delegation consisted of representatives from 12 different species, each an expert in their respective fields. Leading them was academician HFY War, a distinguished Altarian whose 4 eyes could perceive electromagnetic spectrums that most species couldn't even imagine. "Director Voss," HFY War greeted formally, "we are here to conduct our standard review of your trans-dimensional research project. We trust everything is proceeding according to established protocols?" End quote. "Actually," Dr. Voss said with a slight smile, "we've had to abandon most of the established protocols. They turned out to be completely inadequate for this type of research." The delegation exchanged worried glances. Abandoned protocols usually meant disaster in the scientific community. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Corthane, a Sathari physicist, "you could explain your current methodology?" Marcus stepped forward. "We'd be happy to show you rather than just explain." "Shimmer, would you mind demonstrating the quantum probability calculations we've been working on?" "Certainly, Boss Father," Shimmer replied, the endearing title still making Marcus slightly embarrassed after all these months. The entity moved to the center of the room and began what could only be described as a dance. But as Shimmer moved, reality moved with it. Mathematical equations appeared in the air, not as holograms or projections, but as actual, physical manifestations of abstract concepts. The equations shifted and evolved, showing real-time calculations for quantum probability matrices that would have required the consortium's largest computers weeks to process. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Yixkal, a quantum theorist from the vegan system. Those equations exist in 11-dimensional space. No three-dimensional being should be able to perceive them directly. That's where I come in, Marcus explained. I serve as a dimensional interface, translating Shimmer's perceptions into forms that conventional science can understand and verify. And how exactly do you accomplish this translation? Thelwar demanded. Marcus grinned, very carefully. Turns out humans have a natural flexibility when it comes to perceiving multiple dimensions simultaneously. We just needed the right teacher. The demonstration continued for 2 hours. Shimmer showed the delegation advances in energy manipulation, matter transformation, and space-time navigation that represented leaps forward of thousands of years in conventional research. Each breakthrough was carefully documented by Marcus and verified by the station's other researchers. This is unprecedented, admitted Dr. Corthane. In just 6 months, you've made discoveries that will revolutionize our understanding of the universe. The knowledge-wisdom understanding was always there, Shimmer explained patiently. Shimmer simply shows what exists, flows, resonates, in the deeper hidden folded spaces between your three-dimensional perceptions. But the practical applications, Dr. Yixkal said excitedly. The energy equations alone could solve the power crisis affecting 17 different star systems. Actually, Dr. Voss interjected, we've already begun implementing some of Shimmer's solutions. The power requirements for this entire station have dropped by 60%, and we're now generating enough surplus energy to supply 3 neighboring systems. The consortium delegation was stunned. Power generation was one of the most challenging problems facing galactic civilization. Fusion reactors were expensive and dangerous, antimatter was nearly impossible to produce safely, and traditional solar collection was limited by the inverse square law. How? Thelwar asked simply. Shimmer's form rippled with what Marcus had learned to recognize as amusement. Boss Father explains better than Shimmer. Human words, concepts, descriptions are more comfortable familiar for three-dimensional minds. Marcus activated a holographic display showing the station's new power system. It's actually pretty elegant once you understand the principles. Instead of trying to contain and control energy, we let it flow naturally through multiple dimensions. Shimmer taught us how to tap into quantum fluctuations that exist everywhere in space-time, but normally can't be accessed because they occur in dimensions we can't perceive. The process requires constant monitoring, Dr. Voss added, which is why Marcus's role as dimensional interface is so crucial. Without him, we'd have no way to safely regulate the energy flow. Speaking of regulation, Academician Thelwar said carefully, what safety protocols do you have in place? Transdimensional entities are classified as extremely hazardous for good reason. The question hung in the air for a moment. Marcus and Shimmer exchanged what had become their characteristic wordless communication, a brief meeting of minds across dimensional barriers. With respect, Academician, Marcus said finally, your classification system is based on the assumption that transdimensional entities are automatically hostile or dangerous. Shimmer has never shown the slightest aggression toward any member of this station. Number 4. But the potential for disaster is no greater than having a fusion reactor or antimatter storage facility on the station, Dr. Voss interrupted. Less, actually. Shimmer has complete control over its abilities and a vested interest in keeping everyone safe. Besides, Marcus added with a grin, Shimmer's gotten pretty attached to us. Haven't you? The entity's form brightened noticeably. The three-dimensional friends, colleagues, companions are precious, dear, cherished to Shimmer. Boss Father especially teaches Shimmer much about kindness, patience, understanding. Thelwar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, an Altarian expression of deep thought. You speak of this entity as if it were a colleague rather than a research subject, because that's what it is, Dr. Voss said firmly. Shimmer isn't contained here, it chooses to stay. It's not being studied, it's collaborating. The entire foundation of our research is based on mutual respect and voluntary participation. But surely you have contingency plans in case the entity becomes hostile? Marcus and Shimmer looked at each other again. This time, Shimmer answered, if Shimmer wished harm, damage, destruction to the three-dimensional beings, Shimmer would simply unmake, dissolve, return the entire station to constituent atoms. Contingency plans are unnecessary, pointless, futile against transdimensional abilities. The blunt statement sent a chill through the room. But Marcus nodded approvingly. Exactly. Our safety doesn't come from containment or control, it comes from friendship. Shimmer protects us because it wants to, not because it has to. Dr. Corthane leaned forward. And you trust this entity completely? Shimmer saved this station from the Devourers 6 months ago, Dr. Voss pointed out. Since then, it has shared knowledge freely, helped solve humanitarian crises across 3 star systems, and never once used its abilities for anything but peaceful purposes. Yes, we trust our colleague completely. The consortium delegation spent the next 3 days reviewing every aspect of the station's transdimensional research program. They interviewed staff members, examined safety records, and observed dozens of research sessions. What they found challenged every assumption they had about working with entities beyond normal space-time. On their final day, War called the station's senior staff together for a closing meeting. In 30 years of scientific oversight, the academician began, I have never encountered a research program that so thoroughly violated established protocols while producing such extraordinary results. By every conventional standard, this facility should have been evacuated months ago. Marcus felt his heart sink. Were they about to shut down the program? However, War continued, the evidence is undeniable. Your approach has not only been safe, it has been revolutionary. The Galactic Science Consortium is prepared to authorize unlimited funding for this research program. With one condition. Which is? Dr. Voss asked cautiously. We want you to establish training programs for other facilities. If this model can be replicated, if other transdimensional entities can be approached through cooperation rather than containment, it could transform our entire understanding of the universe. Shimmer's form practically glowed with excitement. More friends, colleagues, companions. Shimmer would be joyful, delighted, pleased to help teach the cooperation, understanding friendship approach.